Welcome to Lecture 1, Introduction to Public Relations. My name is Andy Green, and I'll be talking to you today to introduce you to the subject of public relations. Background is that I'm the author of the book Creativity in Public Relations. It was the world's first book on the subject, since translated into 8 different languages. And my work as a PR practitioner was recognised when I won the UK PR Person of the Year award back in 2013. And so I'm sharing with you my experiences of 30 plus years in delivering award-winning PR campaigns. I also run a training agency in creativity and storytelling. There you see the photograph of my running a creativity training class on the London Underground, which I used to do in pre-COVID time, so hopefully one day you'll be able to resume those again. So what you have before you is someone with significant industry experience, where I lecture at 4 different universities, so I share with you hopefully the best of academia and professional practice to give you a better understanding about public relations. So today we're looking really about understanding what is the public relations approach, how to think like a PR person and what PR people do. Understand it's a discipline in flux, but with a great future. So my plea to you is, as much as you can read behind the scenes background reading as possible, do visit the industry professional bodies such as the Public Relations and Communications Association, as well as the Chartered Institute of Public Relations, as well as all the trade media that's out there. The more background you read, the more up to date you can be and more abreast of cutting edge current work. What is public relations then? If you look at the Chartered Institute of Public Relations in the UK, its definition is that public relations is about reputation, the result of what you do, what you say, and what others say about you. Public relations practice is the discipline which looks after reputation with the aim of earning, understanding and support and influencing opinion and behaviour. It's the planned and sustained effort to establish and maintain goodwill and mutual understanding between an organisation and its publics. So what exactly does that mean? So reputation, what people think of you and your standing, their eyes in other people there, is a result of your actions, what you do and what you say, and also what other people are saying about you. And it's a long-term practice where we're looking to influence opinion and behaviours of others, and it's planned, and we're looking to build goodwill, that people have positive opinions of you and understand your situation, like you and want to work with you. I like the cartoon here where it compares the different disciplines. So marketing, a marketing approach would say, I'm a great lover. An advertising approach might say, I'm a great lover, I'm a great lover, I'm a great lover, and keep telling you that. A public relations approach, however, is the other person talking about you saying, trust me, he's a great lover. Branding is about how you have an understanding of who the brand is and what they represent. And you'll find Carl and I will, during the module, be sharing with you different approaches, and also very passionate about brand and how brand communications and how advertising and public relations work to promote them. So let me tell you why public relations. I'll give you a story here. 2 weeks ago I was at this place in the Somerset in the West Country of England, visiting Wilkins Farmhouse Cider. Now you might think, well, why would you want to go there? It's maybe nice countryside and maybe if you like cider, but it did have a special claim to fame. In the cider farm there was a notice board with a very scruffy piece of cutting from a magazine, and it featured an interview with the lead singer of one of the top bands of the last 20-30 years, The Clash, with the lead singer Joe Strummer. And this is an American magazine with a Q&A of Joe Strummer. And when he was asked where is happiness, he said, chilling in Somerset with a flagon of Wilkins Farmhouse cider from Mudgley Hill. So you can see there that how Wilkins Cider has had some exceptional good public relations from Joe Strummer there. They've not had to pay for that as an advert, and yet obviously if you're a big Clash fan or into music, you might be tempted to think, well, I'll have to check this place out. If Joe Strummer thinks it's good, it must be might be of interest to me. So you can see there an example of sort of public relations in action, where good publicity can generate great dividends. So let's look a bit about theory about how PR works. So public relations, we can't tell people what to think, but we can influence what they think about. So through the efforts of public relations, you may be able to get on the agenda, get people aware of your issue, involved in your issue, talking about your issue. You also may be able to be what we call framing the story. So how a story is perceived, whether it's a big story, small story, in terms of the focus of the story. You can influence how people perceive the story, whether it's a good news story, bad news story, part of a wider narrative. And also you can actually, like we call indexing, so define the relative importance of a story to other issues. Furthermore, you can also then, in terms of addressing in bias, where you may be in a position to reinforce an existing bias or address a negative bias that may be adversely affecting you. So you can see different ways there that we can influence other people. We can't tell them what to think, but maybe we can help steer them in the direction we seek. And so, looking forward, we're saying that really public relations is a bridge builder, because inevitably there'll always be a gap between the perceptions that exist about you and your reality. There may be a gap because of out of date, because people are not up to date with the latest information, or not aware of the full story, or are not fully appreciating the significance of who you are and what you do. So our role as a public relations person is to bridge the gap between a reality and its perceptions. And by bridging that gap, you can enable an organization, brand, or individual to get the reputation they deserve. Let me see now, let's explore these examples. Donald Trump is standing for election. Do you think he's got the reputation he deserves? If you were promoting his campaign to vote for him, what sort of messages, what sort of activities would you be doing to present him in the most favourable way? Likewise, the Queen, Her Majesty the Queen. Do you think she's got a good reputation? Again, what would you do to maximise what's good about a reputation or identify any potential negatives? Your being here at Westminster Uni is hopefully a great vote of confidence in the reputation of the University of Westminster. What's good about it? Has it got the reputation it deserves? And so therefore, in our work in public relations, we're looking to ensure that organisations, brands or people have the reputation they deserve. And I define reputation as like what people say about you when you're not in the room. So really, as I say, it's not about what people say to your face, but what they really think about you. So our job in public relations is to manage reputations. And so in communications, you may use traditionally would have a choice between, say, advertising and public relations. Advertising would require a paid-for communication, usually in a third-party medium, where you're paying to get that message over. In public relations, however, if you can get your story in the press, an example like Joe Strummer at Wilkins Farm, it's ostensibly free publicity. Advertising, because something appears in an advert, it might be seen to be maybe more biased, partial, less trusted, whereas a news story featuring about you might seem to be more independent, impartial, potentially more trusted. And also advertising, because you have to pay for every time your message appears, you need to focus your budget. You need to make sure that you can concentrate on what you can afford. Whereas in public relations, you can engage with a far wider range of media targets and outlets. So you see there a number of different advantages relative to each other. So discussion point, take a break, press pause and reflect on these questions. How important do you feel is reputation in effective communications? How does a good reputation help you? How does a bad reputation work against you? Explore those questions, and when you feel you've got some notes down, we'll be discussing this in class, and we'll progress with the video. So, Old school PR would be characterised by being very seen as media relations. In public relations has traditionally been associated with the idea of getting stories in the press. As Morrison Goldsworthy observe here, few modern PR campaigns lack a media element, and most have media coverage at their heart. Indeed, the PR industry's reluctance to admit to the centrality of media relations flies in the face of understanding of PR in wider society. To most outsiders, PR is forever and overwhelmingly associated with journalism and the media. So a really assertive statement there that public relations perhaps equals media relations. And going back to the very origins of public relations practice, in the early part of the 20th century, you have here Ivy Lee, regarded as one of the founding fathers of the practice. He was worked at a time when there was considerable industrial disputes in the United States, with, say, like railway strikes and people not knowing who to believe. He set up his agency with the principles of accuracy, authenticity, and interest, saying this is not a secret press bureau. All our work is done in the open. So therefore, seeking to be an honest broker, an impartial, independent source of information. Very noble, but as time, his critics, he was known as Poison Ivy. So you can see there one of the challenges public relations has on its own reputation in terms of acting in an honourable, open and transparent way. So why use media relations? Use it to improve your company or brand image, to change attitudes, improve relationships with communities. In products, increase your market share. In politics, influence government policy. Or in financial markets, improve your communications with investors. Or your own workforce, your own colleagues and team, improve employee relations. So we urge you to look around, be more media literate, take an active interest in reading the news. So PR help the media by providing information, data, fact-checking for journalists. They provide stories, content, visuals, and activities to support them. Provide them with real-life case studies of stories and news, ideas for stories, interviews and quotes. So we're there ostensibly as a helpful friend to journalists. And a key public relations talent is really like getting able with any information to spot a news value, news interest in it. And we'll be exploring how to write news releases later in this module. But a strong sense of news instinct, knowing what makes news, is critical to media relations. So what do we mean by news? Really anything new or novel or significant to others. And a big challenge is what may appear important to you or your clients or your manager might feel important, may not be regarded as important by journalists or the wider world. So you need to be a judge there of what is news. News, as William Randolph Hearst, the publisher, once remarked, is something which somebody wants suppressed. All the rest is advertising. And with news, it depends on its context. There's local news, which would be very much interested in stories of a local nature, trade and special interest of particular interest to their relevant markets, and also in the nature of news. So there's a different news values with tabloid newspapers and what are called broadsheets, the more established quality press. So you as a public relations practitioner need to develop a news instinct and identify the needs of different news outlets and what sort of stories they'd be interested in. So how do you go about creating news? Well, any organisation or brand will inevitably have numerous achievements, numerous new activities, new products, new services. There'll be events that they'll be organising and doing. Or one technique you can do is create a survey, a market research survey, an opinion on a key issue. Or produce your own report, your own intelligence on a subject. Launching announcements, anniversaries, special awareness days, also linking with celebrities can generate great news, as well as like awards, running award schemes, winning awards, as well as subject of publicity stunts, or being seen as an expert in your market. So all different ways you can create news. Here's an example from Travelodge, the UK budget chain hotel. Over a period of time, these are some of the stories they got in the press about them. There was a story about a couple who chose to live in a Travelodge hotel for for 22 years. Yes, 22 years. Now that's unusual. That's interesting. It's a sort of information you might tell someone else about. Causes surprise. A potential story there, and they got some great coverage. They looked at then creating news stories, so they had the idea of the question of, do you sleepwalk? Do you know anyone who sleepwalks? So they did an annual sleepwalking audit and reported a rise in the number of naked sleepwalkers, God forbid. So you can see they're creating interest where there's a story which will then contain the Travelodge name and therefore help advance Travelodge brand awareness and likability. Stories about which UK cities had the biggest snoring problem. Apparently it's Coventry. Or in the London Olympics back in 2012, did a study of the benefits to tourism. Or the creation of an incentive scheme for the members of the public to help them find new sites. In the run-up to Christmas, when you're thinking, right, we need to get our name out there as people may go away for Christmas, so they invented an activity of a Santa school at one of its London hotels. Also corporate news, so it's planning to recruit more long-term unemployed people in its hotels. A creative gimmick, you heard of rickshaw? Well, what about a kipshaw, a bed designed a certain way? And I do like the story they did before Christmas about any couple called Mary and Joseph could get a free night's stay at their hotel. Or more creative ideas of special cuddle pillows, or if you fancy a goldfish in your room, they was launching a service to promote news there. So you can see there all efforts to get their name and brand in the press and talked about. So being a PR practitioner for media relations, you need to be media savvy, aware of different media. This is why I constantly will be telling you to read media, understand. Develop a news savviness, have an instinct for what makes a good story, and be a news broker, aware with what is right for different media. And journalistic savvy, understand their needs and desires of journalists, know how to entice them with a scoop, a story of good interest, and be a bridge between an organisation, its audience, and its media. Understand the different dimensions there. In the world of communications, there's now actually far fewer journalists working, which is in some ways presents a positive opportunity for PR, because if there's fewer journalists, they're going to be more dependent on stories that are spoon-fed them, presented to them in a news-ready format, and therefore greater potential for coverage. However, the mixed news is that the traditional business models of media have been in decline significantly, particularly newspapers. When I first started my career in the north of England, the Yorkshire Post newspaper had a circulation of around 200,000. Now it's just barely 20,000. So you can see that even though you get coverage in the paper, there's far fewer people reading the paper to therefore limit its effectiveness and power. So, discussion point again. Take a break and reflect on these questions. Check out today's news. Find examples of news stories for both an organisation, brand or celebrity that has had good and also one that's had a bad day in the news. And explore and examine, why was the news story positive or negative? How has the news story affected their reputation? And has the news story changed how you feel about them? Please explore those questions and then start the video again and we'll continue on our journey. So public relations is very much a profession in flux. So the past decade has seen a decline in trust of brands and corporate leaders, the media and other professions. It's been argued we're in a post-truth era where perceptions are more important than facts and truth, and that the traditional commercial model for media is collapsing. And there's been a change in expectations about the relationship between public relations, the media and other audiences. And what's emerged is something called the PESO model, which we'll be going through shortly in a few moments. So there's some many bad news things about public relations. So public relations use less in company names, use less in job titles. The market surveys show that PR salaries are squeezed. On Google, searches for public relations are steady, but declining by 20% for the topic of PR jobs. Out of over 7,000 businesses in the UK registered as public relations, only 99 made a pre-tax profit of 50k, and nearly 2/3 of these companies are less less than 5 years old. And if you actually look at the use of the term public relations or PR, Google Ngram has a brilliant tool that can track usage of words. And if you put in public relations, you see the graph there that tracks the history of public relations from its origins in the early 20th century, a steep rise and peaking in the early 1950s, and then a resurgent in the 1980s and 90s, a period when I started my career. I'm sure it's a coincidence. But then notice a peak in 2003, followed by a decline. Yet the term PR disaster, a massive increase, and ironically a term that's often used to describe issues which are not about communications, but largely about operational problems, where the report said there could be, a PR disaster. So this word public relations faces potential decline in use and also increasing misuse. We talked about the decline of media relations. One of the people listed as one of the key information influencers in PR, a great guy there, Andrew Smith. He did a study of the use of in PR Week, the UK trade publication, and the percentage of articles mention the term media relations. And his analysis reveals that the term peaked in 2004 and a significant decline. So that would indicate that media relations is far less central in public relations practice, even though media relations has traditionally been seen the core of what public relations is about. So what exactly is it that PR people are now doing? So we're now following what's called the PESO model, stand for paid for communications, earned communications, shared or social communications, and owned communications. And so paid can be like display advertising, pay-per-click, paying influencers or paid social. Earned can be earning news coverage, maybe guest blogging as an expert, or organic search results, organic growth on your online. It can also be influencers there acting in an unpaid way where you've got them engaged, got them involved in your story. Shared media and social media can be the social media platforms, word of mouth, or other people giving you referrals. And owned media, think of like websites, signs of vehicles, staff uniforms. Even this presentation could be an owned media as part of Westminster University. So going forward, rather than being seen as primarily a practitioner of earned media, the public relations practitioner now has to be adept across the full spectrum of media channels of paid, earned, shared and owned. And we're now living in an age of far more fragmented media. So that not only is, the media situation changing, it's getting more complex and complicated. So the even greater need for the PR person to be media savvy, media aware. So again, a discussion point. Take a break here and reflect on these questions. What different news media do you read, watch or listen? What's your favourite? What new media could you read, watch or listen to ensure you're better informed? Explore these questions and then join the presentation again. So in planning a communications campaign, we take on board the inspiration from a Nobel Prize winning behavioural psychologist. We're now living in an age where we've got greater understanding of how we think and act and make decisions. And Daniel Kahneman has identified that we're emotionally driven animals, yet if you want to engage with people by connecting in these 5 ways, being known, liked, trusted, front of mind or being talked about, can help you get better engaged. So being known, think about it. If you're buying a new product, do you buy a product of a brand you know, or would you buy a brand you don't know? And chances are, more often than not, you buy the brand that you know. I love the image here of the potential customer saying, I don't know who you are, I don't know your company, I don't know your company's product, I don't know what your company stands for, I don't know your company's customers, I don't know your company's record, I don't know your company's reputation. Now, what is it you want to sell me? So you can see that if you're in a business of selling your product, you need to have all those elements behind you working for you in order to land your sale. So being known is a critical dimension in our communications work. An overlooked area is actually what's called likability. And by that, I don't necessarily mean Facebook likes, but people like you. And by liking you, they're more likely to say yes to you. So it's important then, the more you can do the right thing and be seen to be doing the right thing. So the role of a public relations person can often be a counsel to an organisation or its client, where arguing and advising about taking certain actions, doing some things, not doing others, and acting perhaps as a corporate conscience to the organisation. Also, activities like what's called CSR, corporate social responsibility, doing things that are seen to be good and positive, a good citizen for the world, can boost your likability. Associating with people that are already liked. So if someone likes a celebrity and they're involved in your brand, there's potential there for the halo of that celebrity and the positive glow of that celebrity to reflect well in your brand. Human interest stories. The more you can present yourself as humane and with a human side, the potential for people to engage with you. Use of humour. You make people laugh, bring a smile. Again, builds a likability. Or sponsorship, where you're getting your name associated with a favourable activity. Or doing things for charity times, and being a good citizen. All can help your being liked. Trusted is perhaps the most critical asset for connecting with others. Trust allows you to coexist, cooperate, or collaborate. The greater degree of engagement with others, the higher level of trust is required to ensure effective working together. Trust is critical if you want people to engage and say yes to you. Also, being front of mind. So what do we mean by this? So people are essentially lazy. The technical term for this is cognitive misers. We don't like to use our brain, and we like to really instead choose immediate available options rather than have to think about, explore, research, and so on. So even though you may be known, you need to be front of mind, foremost in people's thinking when they're making decisions or when influence is required. And lastly, talked about. I've heard it's good. So when we're uncertain, we're guided by the opinions of others. This is called social proof. We trust people like us. So we're now in an age, say, of online reviews and what's called distributed trust, where you may check out a number of reviews from people you don't know, but you trust them as people like you, and then make a judgment about whether the brand or action is good, positive, or to be trusted. So again, social proof. The more you can get people talking about you, the more likely then you're to boost your social proof. So then, looking at how public relations people enhance and protect reputations of brands, I mentioned there about they obviously do media monitoring, checking what's in the media and what sort of coverage going on there. Looking at your competitors, researching, looking at primary research in terms of your own investigation, secondary research on background data, looking at developing your messages and your what you'll be saying to the world. Your strategy of how you intend to engage, being creative in coming up with ideas to engage, creating content, stories that provide a consistent and continuous flow of engagement, building your social media activity, looking at work different activities, including crisis, and as I say, producing news releases and pitching these, selling these into news outlets, looking at events, performance, and budgeting there, all regular activities of a PR practitioner. And so in helping brands reach their publics, not only look at their messages, but the audience, who does it they need to be reached, when they need to be reached, where and how, looking at the parameters of how you can target, doing research on media, pitching, selling your stories to influencers or media, researching on influencers, obviously negotiating contracts, creating ambassador programs, looking at internal stakeholders, your employees, search engine optimization, looking at how your Google and your searchability and prime availability in Google's there, looking at paid media, looking at website and other online activities, setting up social channels, reporting on events. So a host of activities there. So when looking at the top UK PR agencies, there's a list here there of the top 20, we did an exercise recently where we, with their websites, we did a word cloud from the About Us section on their website, and what sort of keywords appeared. And you can see here words dominate like communications and business and expertise and brands, campaigns and relationships. Interestingly, two keywords missing there are public relations, and again, maybe evidence of an industry that's in a period of a bit of flux. Suggesting, however, that at the heart of public relations is the need to earn trust, that trust is the touchstone of what defines public relations. And we've recognized earlier that trust is critical for business and life success. So the public relations as a discipline for protecting and nurturing the trust of a brand has a critical role to play. And if you look at all the existing definitions of public relations around the world, you'll find that trust is at the heart of all of them. So in the UK, as we mentioned before, reputation, public relations about reputation. How do you know you've got a good reputation? People trust you. The public relations of society defines public relations about relationships. How do you know you've got good relationships? People trust you. The Public Relations Institute of Australia, it's about mutual understanding. How do you know you understand each other? You trust each other. The Public Relations Council of the United States, influence. How do you know you got influence? You're trusted. Or in Canada, serving the public interest, you're trusted. So trust is at the heart of all these definitions and presents a fantastic opportunity for public relations to emerge as the key champion for nurturing and protecting a brand's trust. So discussion point here, take a break and reflect on these questions. Why is trust so important? Who do you trust? Who don't you trust? Have an explore of these issues and then start again. So before we conclude, really just looking at the key differences of the different perspectives between advertising and public relations. Using sort of the two types of animals in nature, you've got monocular vision animals. They're animals with eyes on the side of their head. And so they survive and thrive by seeing the bigger picture, scanning their environments and adjusting their behavior and position to suit and gain advantage. And we call this we thinking. So it's very much about thinking from the outside, like what do the people in general think, what does the outside world think, and then reflect back on your own brand. So it's very much an outside in approach, and really potential there for leading the way in own thinking, earned and shared of the PESO mix. Whereas contrast, binocular animals, eyes on their front of the head, are very good for being focused on their prey, but weaker at scanning their environments. I'm suggesting this maybe represent what I call me thinking, which represents really maybe a platform for paid for led activity. This is me, this is what I want to achieve, and it's very much an inside out view of the world. And you remember our cartoon at the beginning, so marketing, I'm a great lover. Advertising, I'm a great lover, I'm a great lover, I'm a great lover. But public relations, trust me, he's a great lover. Branding, I understand you're a good lover. So you can see there the different dimensions, dynamics at work, and how public relations is different, and how effective campaigns actually use a balance between the different approaches, and are very much a theme we're emphasizing throughout this module. And looking at future trends in communications, really there's a growth of orchestrated, integrated communications, where you use all dimensions of the PESO model to convey and engage and get your message across. Combined with that is increasing specialization, that people are getting more specialist in a more complex world. So you see two trends there, and we'll be covering both dimensions to help you now in your studies and as a platform for your future careers. So before we finish, take a break and reflect on these questions. What do you think are the main differences between advertising and public relations? When can advertising be the better option, or when can public relations be the better option? Explore those, identify and get some answers, and then join us again as we conclude. So today we've looked at an understanding the public relations perspective, how to think like a public relations person and what PR people do, and understand that it's a discipline in flux, but with great opportunities. Do reflect and learn from what we've shared today. Thank you.